Let's talk about where most writers go wrong when building villains. They start with how twisted the villain is, or how sympathetic they are, or how iconic they look in a trench coat while brooding in the rain. They obsess over aesthetics, backstories, moral ambiguity, all the flashy stuff that looks good on a mood board, but falls apart the second it hits a story that actually demands structure. Because here's the truth, none of that matters if the villain doesn't apply pressure. If they're not actively tearing through the narrative, if they don't collide with the protagonist on a core, inevitable level, then it doesn't matter how cool their mask is or how sad their childhood was. They're just a vibe with a body count. That's why I built the pressure profile. For those unfamiliar with it, the pressure profile breaks down antagonist design into 4 essential axes: who the antagonist is, structurally, what they want, and how that creates conflict, how they pressure the story itself, and how they break the hero's method. In a previous video, I tackled how one can answer the first question. If you'd like to know more about that, go check out that video. In this one, I'm going to tackle the remaining 3 questions while designing an antagonist. If you're working on any, play along with me, and feel free to drop your results, questions, or thoughts in the comments. I always check them out and make a point to try and get back to you on it. I also want to make more of a habit of thanking those who support the channel, whose names are on screen now. It truly means a lot since it helps reassure me that all of this is valuable to others in this period of my career. If you can't become a channel member, no worries. All I ask is that you could like the video, maybe comment, and various other YouTube things to try and help this channel get more traction. In return, I'll continue to do my best to deliver content like this. The Pressure Profile Part 2, the Collision Course. Every great antagonist needs a goal, not just a vague motivation, not destroy the world for vibes, a real, structured pursuit that drives them into direct conflict with the protagonist. That means one thing: you need to define the antagonist's SMART goal. Specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, time-bound. What do they want exactly? How do they plan to get it? What's the timeline? What's the threat level? What's the cost? Think of it like designing a second protagonist. Give them the same structure, the same urgency, the same sense of drive. That's what makes them scary. That's what gives them momentum. Now, here's where things are unique for the antagonist side of this. Once you define their SMART goal, you take that goal and hold it up against the protagonist's pursuit and ask, does it clash? Can only one of them win? Does it invalidate? If the antagonist wins, does the hero's goal become meaningless? Does it force a response? Does the antagonist's pursuit force the hero into action, even if they don't want it? If the answer is no to all 3, your antagonist isn't on a collision course. They're just a background inconvenience. And that kills story momentum. Your goal here is friction that can't be avoided. The antagonist isn't just an obstacle. They're a freight train, and the hero is standing on the tracks. Overall, this part is pretty easy. So, once we're done with that, we next tackle, how do they actually apply pressure to the story itself? In other words, what kind of threat are they? Not every villain throws punches. Not every antagonist has a monologue. And not every threat even knows the hero exists. Some enemies manipulate. Some systems crush from above. Some just keep moving. And if the hero doesn't stop them, they'll flatten everything in their way. This is where the third pressure point comes in. Part 3. Kinetic Threat Type. There are 10 distinct forms of story pressure an antagonist can exert. These aren't about motivation. These aren't about ideology. They're about function. What kind of threat are they in the story engine? Are they a schemer? A destroyer? A force of nature? A parasite? Do they destroy from the inside or crush from the outside? Do they escalate or corrupt? You can think of these like attack patterns. And the second you understand their pressure function, you'll know how to structure scenes around them, and why the protagonist can't just ignore them. 1. The blocker. Straightforward and brutal. They physically, politically, or systematically stop the hero from making progress. They're a wall, and the hero either breaks it or breaks themselves trying. Number 2. The corruptor. They let the hero get what they want, but they make it poisonous. The goal becomes dangerous, hollow, or morally compromised by the time it's within reach. They win by making the ending not worth it. Number 3. The reflector. They chase the same ambition, but for the wrong reasons. They force the protagonist to prove their intentions are better, cleaner, or more worthy. This is more warfare through shared ambition. 4. The subverter. They don't block the goal, they undermine it. They reframe the hero's mission as naive, dangerous, or even villainous. They make the audience and the protagonist ask, should this even be done? 5. The dismantler. They attack the hero's ability to act. Not the goal, but the team, the tools, the resources, the foundation. They hollow out the hero's structure until the pursuit becomes impossible. Number 6. The decoy. They lead the hero in the wrong direction on purpose. Their job is distraction. Send the hero chasing shadows while the real threat grows. They make the story about realizing too late. 7. The mutator. They make the pursuit possible, but only if the hero becomes someone else. They push identity, morality, and transformation. If the hero wants to win, they may lose who they are in the process. 8. The puppeteer. They gave the hero their goal from the start. Every step forward has been part of their plan. This villain doesn't oppose the hero's pursuit. They designed it. 9. The usurper. They beat the hero to the goal. Now the hero's job isn't just to achieve, it's to recover, reclaim, or overthrow. Victory got stolen. Now it's time for the real fight to begin. And 10. The mirage maker. They keep the goal just out of reach. Escalation, illusion, reinvention. Whatever it takes to make the finish line vanish when the hero thinks they're close. This is a villain that breaks momentum, morale, and time. Each one of these shapes the plot in a different direction. The same antagonist can switch types mid-story, or combine them. Decoy plus usurper, puppeteer plus corruption. Whatever fits the pressure. But picking even one type threat gives you technical clarity. Just make sure you can answer this question. What form does their interference take? And now you know how this villain hits the story where it hurts. Not in the punch, but in the path. And that leaves one question we must answer. Part 4, the tactical counter. By now, you've got the big pieces, who the antagonist is, what they want, how they threaten the goal itself. But here's one last question that decides whether the hero struggles, or just coasts. How does the antagonist frustrate the hero's method of problem solving? Because your protagonist doesn't have just a goal. They have a pattern, a method, a signature approach. It's how they move through the world when things go wrong. And a great antagonist knows how to punish that pattern. This is where we zoom in on what I call the tactical counter grid. 6 pressure tactics villains use to cut through the hero's approach and make them suffer for it. Each one attacks at different axes of the hero's problem-solving style. These aren't narrative roles. They're battlefield tactics, psychological weapons, strategy warfare. The antagonist could outplay them. In this case, they outsmart, outplan, or outmaneuver the hero. Strategy-based heroes get exposed. Confidence turns into humiliation. It's a chess match. The villain's always one step ahead, or they could overload them. The antagonist bombards the hero. Too many problems, too little time. This works especially well against methodical or principled heroes. The pressure forces mistakes, corrects their discipline, and splits their focus until something gives. They can also use some resource denial. The villain cuts off tools, allies, time, or access. This hits heroes who rely on systems, support, or planning. It forces them to act alone, act now, or act with less than they need. Some antagonists prefer emotional undermining. They gaslight, shame, destabilize. They twist the emotional stakes until the hero second guesses their own instincts. This is psychological warfare, perfect for controlling intimate or manipulative villains. And, of course, there is corruption. They don't stop the hero's method, they make the method itself become the problem. Hero starts becoming someone they hate just by trying to win. And finally, there is existential pressure. The hero's approach and identity are fundamentally incompatible with victory. The villain doesn't just attack what they do, they expose who they are as the real problem. This is when winning requires a kind of self-portrayal. Most heroes will use more than one of these, but one should always dominate. That dominant tactic creates friction in every scene, and it ensures that even if the hero knows what to do, actually doing it becomes a war of attrition. Now, before I wrap this up, a little something I wish to address. The difference between kinetic threat types and tactical counters, such as, I'm sure you noticed corruption is on both lists, for example. What's up with that? Here's the core distinction. Kinetic threat types describe how the antagonist pressures the story pursuit. They shape what the hero is chasing, or how hard it is to get there. Tactical counter pressures describe how the antagonist pressures the hero's method. They disrupt how the hero tries to get what they want. So when you see corruption in both lists, the corruptor makes the goal rotten. The corruption tactic makes the approach destructive. One poisons the prize, one poisons the path. And that's the beauty of this system. Each layer targets a different function of the narrative engine. So you don't have a villain who's just cool. You have a villain who's structurally designed to challenge the story, the pursuit, the protagonist, and the method. Now, at this point, you should have a fully structured protagonist and a fully structured antagonist, built to pressure them at every level. But if you have more than one antagonist, I'm sure you're wondering, how do I know which one should be the main antagonist? I'll answer that question in the next video.